The scope trembled in her hands as Jessica Kane calculated the impossible. A 400-meter shot that would either save American lives or doom them all. Her target, the enemy sniper, who had killed her father's generation and was now hunting hers. But what she discovered in his scope would change everything she thought she knew about warfare. This is the true story of the most impossible shot ever made, and the woman who proved that sometimes impossible just means no one has been brave enough to try. From the first impossible shot to training 847 elite snipers, discover how one woman's precision changed the fate of modern military operations forever. Subscribe for more incredible military stories that will leave you speechless. The enemy was hunting me. Female snipers, 400 Master shot that changed everything. The morning sun cast long shadows across forward operating base Thunder as Staff Sergeant David Hayes kissed his wife's photograph one last time before tucking it into his vest pocket. 2,000 miles away in Colorado, his twin 6-year-old daughters Emma and Sophie were probably eating breakfast, asking their mother when Daddy was coming home. Hayes had promised them he would be back for their 7th birthday in 3 months. He never made it to lunch. At 8:47 hours, Hayes was leading a routine patrol 2 kilometers from the base when his head simply vanished in a pink mist. The supersonic crack of the rifle shot arrived a full second later, echoing off the Afghan mountains like thunder from a clear sky. The distance was impossible, the precision inhuman. Chief Petty Officer Jessica Kane was cleaning her rifle in the armory when the casualty report came through the radio. Another dead American, another family destroyed by an enemy who killed from distances that shouldn't be possible with conventional weapons. She paused in her methodical cleaning routine, her gray-green eyes hardening with something that went beyond professional concern. Hayes had been a good soldier, a father, a man whose daughters would now grow up asking questions that had no good answers. 20 minutes later, Commander Jake Morrison found Jessica in the same position, still holding a cleaning rod, but no longer moving. Morrison was old-school military, 45 years old with graying temples, and the weathered look of someone who'd spent 23 years turning impossible situations into accomplished missions. He'd survived 3 combat deployments and earned his commander's stripes through tactical brilliance, not politics. Kane, he said, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that kept men alive. We need to talk. Jessica looked up, her expression controlled, but her hands betraying the slightest tremor. Sir, this Reaper character, the sniper who just took Hayes, intel suggests he's been operating for 3 weeks picking off coalition forces from ranges that exceed conventional engagement capability. 6 dead, 14 wounded, all precision shots from distances approaching 2,000 meters. Morrison pulled up a chair, studying the young SEAL who'd earned a reputation for making shots that appeared in training case studies. At 28, Jessica Kane was already legendary among Navy snipers, but her background made her unique in ways that had nothing to do with military training. Tell me about your father, Morrison said quietly. Jessica's hands stilled completely. Sir, Master Sergeant Cole Kane, Army Rangers, killed in action Afghanistan 2007. Enemy sniper, long-range engagement. You were 12. Morrison's voice carried no judgment, just the factual delivery of someone who'd read her file thoroughly. That's why you started shooting competitively at 13. That's why you joined the Navy. That's why you became a sniper. My father taught me that precision meant knowing yourself, Jessica said, her voice steady despite the subject matter. When the military came to our door to tell us he was dead, I decided to learn everything there was to know about stopping people like the one who killed him. Morrison nodded. And that's why you understand long-range ballistics at a level that most snipers never reach. The question is, can you engage the Reaper at the distances he's operating? Jessica was quiet for a long moment, processing what Morrison was really asking. Sir, standard doctrine says effective range for the P-38 Lapua is 1,800 meters in ideal conditions. The Reaper has been making kills at 2,400. That's beyond conventional capability. That's not what I asked, Chief. I asked if you can engage him. Jessica met Morrison's gaze directly. Yes, sir. The physics allows it. Most snipers stop at conventional ranges because that's where their training stops, not because the rifle can't reach farther. With proper atmospheric calculations, wind analysis at multiple altitudes, and accounting for Coriolis effect in spin drift, 2,400 meters is achievable. Morrison leaned forward. Explain. The bullet drop at that range is approximately 30 feet, sir. Wind drift could be 8 to 12 feet, depending on conditions. But the biggest factor most people ignore is that the bullet spends nearly 4 seconds in flight, climbing 85 feet above the bore line before descending to target. During that time, Earth's rotation affects trajectory. The barrel's twist rate creates horizontal deflection, independent of wind, and atmospheric conditions change the drag coefficient in ways that standard ballistics tables can't account for. Morrison stared at her. You can calculate all that. I can approximate it well enough to hit a human-sized target, sir. The question is whether command wants me to tram. Before Morrison could respond, his radio crackled with the urgency that meant immediate attention. Thunder Base, this is Patrol 7. We've got movement on the northern ridge approximately 2,400 meters. Possible sniper position. Morrison keyed his radio. Patrol 7, take cover and maintain observation. Do not engage. He looked at Jessica. Time to find out what you can really do, Chief. The movement to Overwatch position took 40 minutes of careful navigation through terrain that provided concealment from the Northern Ridge complex. Jessica's team consisted of Petty Officer First Class Tommy Sullivan and Petty Officer Second Class Maria Santos, both experienced SEAL operators who'd worked with her on previous missions. They carried security while Jessica focused on the precision shooting that had made her reputation. Sullivan was 26, a former college football player from Texas who joined the Navy to serve his country and discovered he had a talent for small unit tactics. Santos was 24, a former competitive shooter from Arizona who'd earned her place in naval special warfare through exceptional marksmanship and absolute fearlessness under fire. Chief, Sullivan said as they established position, that ridge is a long way out. You sure about this? Jessica was setting up her equipment with the methodical precision that characterized everything she did. The Macmillan TAC 338 rifle, Schmidt & Bender scope, Kestrel weather station, Leica rangefinder and ballistic calculator represented the cutting edge of precision shooting technology. But technology was just tools. The real weapon was knowledge. I'm sure the physics works, Jessica replied, working her laser rangefinder. Whether I execute properly is a different question. Santos, monitoring their rear security, spoke without taking her eyes off her sector. What's the longest shot you've made in competition? 2450 at the Wyoming Long Range Championship 2016. But that wasn't combat, wasn't time pressure, wasn't someone shooting back. Jessica paused in her setup. And it wasn't personal. Morrison joined them 20 minutes later, carrying his 20-power spotting scope and the command presence that came from leading men in combat. He studied the northern ridge through his optics, calculating angles and distances with practiced efficiency. I've got movement, he said. Someone's setting up position behind those rocks. Range appears to be 2390 to 2,400 meters. He turned to Jessica. This is your shot, Chief. Make it count. Jessica settled behind her rifle, adjusting her position until everything felt natural. The bipod was firmly planted, her body at a 15-degree angle to the rifle axis, stock weld perfect against her cheek. She'd practiced this position thousands of times until it became muscle memory. Through her scope at 25 power magnification, the target was barely visible. Just a dark shape among rocks wavering slightly in the heat mirage that rose from sun-heated terrain. At this distance, distinguishing human from rock formation required careful observation and patience. She worked through her calculations with practiced speed. Range 394 meters, confirmed by laser rangefinder. Wind 8 to 10 knots from the east, but variable by altitude. Temperature 28 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric pressure standard for this elevation. All factors that would affect bullet flight in ways that simplified ballistics tables couldn't predict. Drop is approximately 368 inches, Jessica murmured, more to herself than to Morrison. That's 30 feet 7 inches. Wind drift at 10 knots steady would be about 102 inches, but wind isn't steady. It's stronger at mid-level than at ground level or peak trajectory. Morrison watched through his spotting scope, trying to follow calculations that exceeded his training. How do you know wind conditions at different altitudes? Vegetation movement, sir. I can see grass and shrubs at various elevations responding differently to wind. The bullet will be most affected by crosswind during the middle portion of flight when it's moving slowest. So I weight my wind call toward conditions at 800 to 1,500 meters downrange. Jessica made her final adjustments. Elevation 353 clicks up, meaning she was aiming nearly 31 feet above where the target actually sat. Windage 48 clicks right, accounting for wind drift, Coriolis effect, and spin drift. To an observer, it would look like she was aiming at empty sky. But that's where physics said the bullet needed to go. She settled her breathing, finding her natural respiratory pause. Her finger took up trigger, Slack feeling the 3.5-pound breakpoint. Morrison held his breath beside her, understanding that he was witnessing something extraordinary. The shot broke clean. The 338 Lapua Magnum roared, sending a 300-grain bullet downrange at 850 feet per second. The rifle pushed back against Jessica's shoulder with authority, but she maintained her position, watching through the scope. For 3.95 seconds, nothing happened. The bullet climbed toward its peak trajectory 85 feet above the bore line, slowing from supersonic to transonic to subsonic speeds as Earth rotated beneath its flight path, and crosswinds pushed it right in precise accordance with physics and Jessica's calculations. Then the target's head snapped back in a pink mist that was visible even at 394 meters. Morrison stared through his spotting scope, processing what he'd just witnessed. 23 years of military experience, thousands of shots observed in training and combat. Nothing had prepared him for watching someone hit a human target at nearly 1.5 miles with a conventional rifle. "Holy shit, Chief," he whispered. "You just made a shot that, according to every manual I've read, shouldn't be physically possible." Jessica worked her bolt with practiced efficiency, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a fresh round. She remained focused on her scope, scanning for additional threats. "Not impossible, sir. Just requires accounting for variables that simplified ballistics ignore." Sullivan, watching through his own optics, lowered them slowly. "Ma'am, I've been a SEAL for 7 years. That's the most incredible thing I've ever seen anyone accomplish." Santos, still maintaining security, spoke without taking her eyes off her sector. "Did she really just hit someone at 2,400 meters? That's like 1.5 miles." Morrison continued staring at the distant target, which wasn't moving anymore and never would again. "Chief, walk me through that shot. How did you calculate all those variables in, 3 minutes?" "Ballistic calculator accounts for the major factors, sir. Range, wind temperature, pressure, humidity, Coriolis spin drift, shooting angle. I input the conditions, it outputs the corrections. Then I verify against my own understanding of the physics to make sure the calculator isn't giving me bad data." Morrison nodded slowly. "So anyone with this software could make that shot?" "No, sir. The software provides data. Execution is different. At this range, a tiny error in shooting fundamentals translates to feet of error at target. Quarter-inch variation in stock weld, half-pound difference in trigger pull, slight cant in the rifle. Any of those mean a miss. The ballistics knowledge gets you close. Perfect fundamentals determine whether you hit." Sullivan spoke up again. "Ma'am, what's the real success probability on a shot like that?" Jessica considered the question. "Maybe 35% given all variables. The calculations are complex, the conditions constantly changing. Even with perfect fundamentals and accurate data, there's still luck involved. Wind could shift during flight time. Range estimate could be off by a few meters. Any number of factors could cause a miss." Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. 35%. You took a shot with 65% chance of failure. Better than 0% chance of stopping that sniper, sir. And much better than the 100% chance more soldiers die if I do nothing." Jessica's voice carried quiet conviction. "Staff Sergeant Hayes had twin daughters 6 years old. They'll grow up without their father because someone thought distance made them safe. Today, that someone learned different." The confirmation took 1 hour and 15 minutes. Morrison led Sullivan and Santos on a careful approach to the northern ridge, while Jessica maintained overwatch, ready to provide precision fire support if they encountered resistance. When they reached the sniper's position, they found exactly what Jessica's shot had accomplished. The Reaper was dead killed by a single 338 Lapua Magnum round that had struck him center mass after traveling 294 meters through 4 seconds of complex ballistic trajectory. Morrison examined his body and equipment with professional efficiency. Male, approximately 40 to 45 years old, European features suggesting Eastern European origin. Professional military gear, not coalition equipment, but high-quality tactical clothing that indicated extensive training and significant resources. His rifle was a Russian-made Ursus T5000 chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. The Kales K624i scope was worth $4,000. This was a $12,000 setup professional-grade equipment used by military snipers worldwide. This wasn't some insurgent, Morrison reported over radio. Professional sniper, probably foreign military contractor. Russian equipment, professional setup, evidence of sustained operations. This individual was conducting systematic military operations against coalition forces. Sullivan was examining range cards found in the sniper's position. Distances marked to various points in the valley were to 920 meters, 280 meters, 340 meters, all the ranges where he'd been making kills. He'd prepared this position, done his homework, set up for extended operations. But then Sullivan found something that made his blood run cold. Commander, he called with urgency that transcended normal comm discipline. You need to see this immediately. Priority intelligence. Morrison moved to Sullivan's position. The folder contained surveillance photographs, high-resolution images taken at FOB Thunder over the past 3 weeks. Training sessions, equipment, maintenance movement, patterns. And prominently featured were multiple photographs of Jessica Kane. The folder held intelligence files on 12 coalition snipers operating in theater. Each had a threat assessment capabilities, known effective ranges, deployment patterns. Professional dossiers compiled through systematic intelligence collection. Jessica's file was thickest. Photos from multiple angles, notes in Russian, which Morrison could read enough of to understand the assessment. Female SEAL sniper, exceptional capability, long-range competition background. Estimated effective range, 1/802,000 meters. Priority elimination target. The final note, dated 3 days ago, made everything clear. Subject observed conducting advanced training with subordinates. Extreme range techniques noted. Threat level critical. Recommend immediate elimination before capabilities transfer to wider force. Use standard personnel as opportunity targets to draw subject into engagement range. Morrison's jaw tightened as understanding settled. He keyed his radio with the weight of revelation that changed everything. Kane the Reaper wasn't just hunting coalition forces. He was hunting you specifically. Hayes and the others. They died because he was trying to draw you out into the open. Jessica's response came after a long pause, processing the information that 6 soldiers had died as bait in a trap designed to kill her. Understood, sir, which means this wasn't just about stopping a threat. It was about survival. Mine and everyone he would have targeted after eliminating me. As they gathered intelligence materials and prepared for extraction, Morrison reflected on what had just occurred. The impossible shot hadn't just eliminated a threat to coalition forces. It had ended an assassination campaign specifically targeting the one person who possessed the capability to stop the Reaper at his own ranges. 6 soldiers had died, but potentially dozens more would have died if the Reaper had succeeded in eliminating the only coalition sniper who could engage him effectively at extreme range. Jessica Kane had just proven that impossible was simply another word for difficult, and difficult could be mastered through proper preparation and flawless execution. But as they moved toward extraction, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. If one enemy sniper had operated at these ranges, there would be others. The battlefield was evolving and conventional capabilities were no longer sufficient. Jessica Kane had just demonstrated what was possible when someone refused to accept conventional limitations. The question was whether that knowledge could be transferred to others before more American soldiers died to threats operating beyond traditional engagement ranges. The impossible shot had been made. Now came the harder task, teaching others that impossible was just another problem waiting for the right solution. Back at FOB Thunder that evening, Jessica sat alone in the armory, methodically cleaning her TAC 338 with ritualistic care. She documented the day's shooting in her logbook with precise notation, range conditions, calculations, results. Professional discipline that separated operators from everyone else. Morrison found her there, watching her maintain the weapon that had just changed both their understanding of what was possible in modern warfare. "Chief," he said quietly, "what you did today, that's going to change things. Command is going to want to know how you did it. They're going to want it documented, taught, replicated." Jessica looked up from her rifle maintenance. "Sir, that shot just proved that our understanding of engagement ranges is outdated. If you can hit at 2,400 meters, others can learn to as well. We can't let enemy snipers operate with the impunity at ranges where they think they're safe. Morrison paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm recommending you for advanced training assignment. Hadadan. Develop curriculum for extreme range precision shooting. Teach others what you just demonstrated. Jessica considered the implications. Teaching would mean sharing knowledge that had taken her 16 years to develop. It would mean transforming personal capability into institutional advantage. It would mean that Hayes's death and her father's death could serve a purpose beyond individual grief. Staff Sergeant Hayes, she said quietly. His daughters are 6 years old. Same age I was when I lost my father to an enemy sniper. If I can teach others to make shots like today's maybe fewer 6-year-old girls have to learn what it means to grow up without their fathers. Morrison nodded. That's exactly what I was thinking, Chief. Transform personal tragedy into protection for others. Make sure the impossible shot becomes possible shots plural. Jessica returned to her rifle maintenance, but her mind was already working through the challenge Morrison had presented. Teaching extreme range precision shooting would require translating instinctive knowledge into systematic instruction, physics principles into practical application, individual capability into transferable skill. It would be the hardest thing she'd ever attempted. But if it meant that more soldiers came home to their families, if it meant that enemy snipers could no longer operate with impunity at extreme range, if it meant that Hayes's daughters and thousands of other children didn't have to grow up with the hole in their lives that never healed, then it was worth the effort. The impossible shot had been the beginning, not the end. Tomorrow, Jessica Kane would start the process of teaching others that impossible was just another word for unprepared, and preparation could overcome any limitation. But tonight, she honored the weight of what she'd done. One round fired, one enemy eliminated 6 American soldiers, avenged. Hayes's twin daughters would grow up knowing their father's death had meaning, that someone had cared enough to attempt the impossible to stop the person who'd killed him. That was worth carrying the weight. That was worth everything that would come next. The legend of the 2,394-meter shot was just beginning. 6 months after the impossible shot, Chief Petty Officer Jessica Kane stood in an empty warehouse at Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California, staring at 45,000 square feet of concrete floor and bare metal rafters that would become the Advanced Long-Range Precision School. The space smelled of possibility and dust in equal measure. Captain David Richardson, Special Operations Training Director, walked beside her with the purposeful stride of someone who had spent 30 years turning vision into reality. Chief, you've got 18 months to build this from nothing into the premier long-range shooting school in the world. $2.5 million in funding authorization to recruit instructor staff, mandate to create curriculum that changes how we think about precision engagement. Jessica studied the empty space mental calculations, already converting vacancy into shooting lanes, classroom areas, equipment storage, ballistic testing facilities. Sir, I want to include partner nations in the program. Not just U.S. forces, Canadians, British, Australians, anyone with legitimate special operations requirements who can benefit from these techniques. Richardson nodded approval. Agreed. This knowledge shouldn't be limited by nationality. It should be limited by need and capability. Build the best program possible. Make it available to those who will use it to protect their people. Commander Jake Morrison had transferred from operational assignment to become primary instructor alongside Jessica. At 45, he brought tactical experience and institutional credibility that would be essential for establishing the program's reputation. Their partnership had been forged in the crucible of the Reaper engagement, built on mutual respect and shared understanding of what extreme range capability could accomplish. The first 3 months were construction and curriculum development. Jessica worked 16-hour days translating combat experience into systematic instruction that could be replicated by other instructors. The science had to be rigorous, the techniques teachable, the standards unforgiving. She wrote and rewrote the course outline 17 times before satisfaction arrived. Phase 1, 2 weeks of ballistic science theory, atmospheric effects, mathematical foundations. Students would learn that bullets didn't follow simple trajectories, but were affected by dozens of variables interacting in complex ways. Phase 2, 2 weeks of technology integration. Ballistic calculators, weather stations, range-finding equipment. Tools were force multipliers, but understanding the underlying physics remained essential. Phase 3. 3 weeks of shooting fundamentals refined to levels that eliminated human error as a variable. Position, breathing, trigger control, follow-through, all perfected to standards that most people never achieved. Phase 4. 3 weeks of practical application at progressively increasing ranges from 1,000 to 2,500 meters. Theory transformed into capability through discipline by practice. Total course length 10 weeks. Selection criteria must already be qualified military sniper with minimum 2 years operational experience. Maximum class size 12 students per iteration, ensuring high instructor to student ratio. Expected failure rate 30 to 40%, because not everyone possessed the aptitude or dedication required for extreme range precision. The range facilities took shape through fall and winter. Shooting positions constructed from 100 meters out to 700 meters, exceeding the distances that had made Jessica famous because instruction required pushing beyond operational necessity to build confidence at practical ranges. Weather station network installed at 500-meter intervals, providing real-time atmospheric data across the entire range complex. Ballistic calculator systems at each shooting position. Classroom equipped with physics lab equipment, ballistic gelatin testing chambers, high-speed cameras for analyzing bullet flight. The day the range became operational, Jessica fired the ceremonial first shot. Target at 400 meters conditions nearly identical to the Reaper engagement 8 months earlier. Morrison spotted for her with the same 20-power scope he'd used in Afghanistan. Range 2398 meters, wind 7 knots, variable temperature 18 degrees Celsius, Morrison called. "You ready for this, Chief?" Jessica settled behind her TAC 338, the rifle that had made history and would now make instructors. "Always ready, sir. That's what preparation means." The shot broke clean. Flight time 3.9 seconds. Impact 2 inches left of center. Morrison's voice carried quiet satisfaction. "Dead center hit, Chief. Some things don't change." "Physics doesn't change, sir. Preparation doesn't change. Everything else is just variables to account for." The first class of Advanced Long-Range Precision School assembled in March, 9 months after Jessica's return from Afghanistan. 12 students, 4 Navy SEALs, 3 Army Special Forces, 2 Marine Scout snipers, 1 Air Force combat controller, 1 Canadian JTF-2 operator, 1 British SAS. Age range 26 to 38. All combat veterans, all accomplished snipers by conventional standards. All about to discover that conventional standards represented the beginning of possibility, not the limit. Jessica stood before them on opening day morning, sun streaming through warehouse windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted through air thick with expectation and skepticism. "Gentlemen," she began, "welcome to Advanced Long-Range Precision School. I know what you're thinking. Can I really learn to shoot at 2,000 plus meters? Is this practical in combat? Does capability at extreme range matter when most engagements happen at 400 meters or less?" She paused, letting the question settle. "The answers are maybe, sometimes, and absolutely. This course is hard. The science is complex. The shooting standards are unforgiving. Some of you won't graduate. That's acceptable. This level isn't for everyone." A Navy SEAL from Team 3 raised his hand. Senior Chief Daniel Morrison, 34, 12 years of service, Afghanistan veteran with 3 combat deployments. "Chief Kane, with respect, the shot you made in Afghanistan, the 2,400-meter engagement, that's legendary. But it's also one shot. How do we know it wasn't luck? How do we know these techniques work consistently?" Jessica appreciated the directness. Skepticism from intelligent people meant they were thinking critically, not accepting claims on faith. "Fair question, Senior Chief. You're right that one shot could be luck. So let me provide additional data points." She pulled up a presentation showing ballistic calculations, hit rates, environmental conditions. "During that deployment, I made 14 shots between 1,800 and 2,400 meters. 13 hits, 1 miss. The miss came when wind shifted unpredictably during bullet flight. Hit rate 92.8% at extreme range. That's not luck, that's methodology." The room was silent, processing implications. "But don't take my word for it," Jessica continued. Over the next 10 weeks, you'll learn the methodology. You'll make the calculations. You'll execute the shots. By week 8, you'll be engaging targets at 2,000 meters. Success rate among students who complete this program averages 37% first-round hit probability at that range. That's more than 10 times better than untrained shooters attempting the same shots. She looked directly at Senior Chief Morrison. Methodology works. Question is whether you'll put in the work to master it. The first week destroyed assumptions. Students who'd considered themselves experts in ballistics discovered they'd been working with simplified models that broke down beyond 100 to 200 meters. The mathematics was undergraduate physics, not incomprehensible but detailed and unforgiving. Every variable mattered. Every calculation required precision. British SAS Sergeant James Hartley, 31 veteran of Iraq and Syria, approached Jessica after the third day looking intellectually overwhelmed. "Ma'am, I've been a sniper for 8 years. I thought I understood external ballistics. This course is showing me I understood maybe 20% of what actually affects bullet flight. It's humbling." That's the appropriate response, Sergeant. Humility creates space for learning. Arrogance closes it. You understood enough ballistics to be effective at conventional ranges. Now you're learning what's required at unconventional ranges. The fundamentals don't change. The complexity increases. Week 2 introduced technology with the understanding that tools enhance capability but couldn't replace fundamental knowledge. Ballistic calculators could process complex mathematics in seconds, but garbage input produced garbage output. Students learned to verify calculator results against manual calculations, to recognize when software gave incorrect data, to troubleshoot in field conditions where technology failed. Week 3 was the crucible. Shooting fundamentals refined to levels that eliminated human error. Trigger control perfect enough that 3-pound triggers broke without disturbing sight picture. Breathing controlled enough that respiratory pause provided 5-second windows of absolute stillness. Position so stable that rifles became extensions of skeleton, no muscle tension required to maintain aim. Canadian JTF-2 operator Master Corporal Jean-Marc Dubois, 29, bilingual and methodical, struggled with trigger control that had been adequate at 800 meters, but created problems at 1,500. "Chief, I've fired 10,000 rounds in training. My trigger press has never been an issue." Jessica watched through her spotting scope as his groups at beyond 500 meters scattered 8 inches horizontally. "Your trigger press is creating 0.3 pounds of lateral pressure before the break. At 800 meters, that's negligible. At 1,500, that's 8 inches of horizontal displacement. We're going to rebuild your trigger technique from foundation level." Dubois considered pride warring with pragmatism. Pragmatism won. "Yes, ma'am. Show me how." They spent 3 hours on the range, Jessica working with him one-on-one, breaking down trigger press into components, rebuilding muscle memory, instilling new patterns. By session's end, his groups had tightened to 4 inches. Still not perfect, but improving. "That's progress," Jessica said. "Perfection takes 10,000 repetitions. You've done 50. Keep working." Week 5 brought first practical application at ranges beyond conventional training. Targets at 1,500 meters. Students who had been confident at 1,000 discovered that additional 500 meters changed everything. Wind that seemed manageable became dominant. Bullet drop that could be estimated required calculation. Environmental effects that could be ignored became critical. First round hit rate 15%. 9 misses, 3 hits out of 12 students. Frustration was universal. Senior Chief Morrison missed his first shot by 14 inches left. He recalculated, adjusted, fired again. 6 inches right. Third shot impact 2 inches from center. He lowered his rifle expression, mixing relief and disbelief. "Ma'am, I've been shooting for 12 years. That's the hardest 3 shots I've ever made." "That's the point, Senior Chief. We're operating at edges of human capability and equipment performance. Everything has to be right, or you miss. But when everything is right, when calculation meets execution, you hit at ranges other people say are impossible." By week 7, the class had consolidated. 2 students had dropped, acknowledging that mathematical complexity exceeded their aptitude. The remaining 10 had achieved first-round hit rates approaching 30% at 1,800 meters. They'd internalized the methodology, understood the physics, refined fundamentals to levels approaching Jessica's standards. Week 8 was moment of truth. Targets at 2,000 meters. Each student got one shot. Cold bore, no warm-up. Complete calculation from atmospheric readings to final trigger, press. Pass-fail evaluation. Success rate 4 hits out of 10 attempts, 40%. Senior Chief Morrison made his shot, impact 3 inches high. Sergeant Hartley hit 4 inches left. Master Corporal Dubois centered his perfectly celebration, restrained but genuine strong. Ma'am, Dubois said, I never thought I could do that. 2,000 meters first shot. That's what happens when methodology meets dedication. You did the work, Jean-Marc. Learned the science, perfected the fundamentals. The shot is just the result of preparation meeting opportunity. At graduation ceremony, Captain Richardson addressed the 7 graduates and 3 honor graduates who'd achieved exceptional performance. Gentlemen, you've completed training that exists nowhere else in the world. You've mastered techniques that most people consider impossible. You possess capability that can change outcomes in situations where conventional solutions fail. But with capability comes responsibility. Richardson paused, letting weight settle. The knowledge you've gained isn't for competition, isn't for ego, isn't for setting records. It's for protecting your teammates when they face threats at ranges beyond normal engagement. It's for eliminating enemies who think distance provides safety. It's for making impossible shots that save American lives. 3 years after the first class graduated, Advanced Long Range Precision School had become an institution. 16 courses completed, 127 students graduated from 219 who'd attempted training. 58% graduation rate that maintained standards without compromise. But success created unexpected challenges. Intelligence agencies had identified threats that made Jessica's blood run cold. Foreign military contractors were training opposing forces in extreme-range sniper techniques. The methodology looked familiar, too familiar. Someone had stolen curriculum from Advanced Long Range Precision School. Classified training materials, ballistic calculation methods, Jessica's proprietary techniques for teaching impossible shots. And now those techniques were being used against American forces. 3 SEALs had been killed in Syria by enemy snipers, making shots at 1,900+ meter ranges that shouldn't have been possible for insurgent forces. The ballistic signatures, tactical patterns, professional discipline, all indicated training using methodologies Jessica had developed. The call came at 0200. Rear Admiral Richardson, now SOCOM Operations Director, his voice carrying urgency that pulled Jessica from sleep. Senior Chief, we have a situation. Enemy sniper in Syria operating at extreme range has eliminated 3 SEALs in 2 weeks. Intelligence suggests the shooter was trained using your methodologies, possibly by someone who attended ALRPS or accessed stolen curriculum. We need you back in the fight. One more deployment. Stop this threat before more SEALs die from techniques you created. Marcus, lying beside her, heard enough of conversation to understand. When she hung up, he said quietly, "You're going." Not a question, a statement. Understanding. My techniques, my responsibility. If someone's killing American soldiers using methods I developed, then I stop them. I know. He pulled her close. Come home safe. That's all I ask. Jessica had met Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb 2 years earlier at a military symposium on precision shooting. He was a SEAL instructor at Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training who'd heard legendary stories about the sniper who'd made the impossible shot. The connection was immediate. He understood military culture without needing explanation, appreciated precision, without being intimidated by her expertise, made her laugh with ease that came from someone secure enough in his own achievements not to compete with hers. 2 weeks later, Forward Operating Base Sentinel, Syria. Jessica, now 32 years old, back in combat operations after 3 years focused on teaching. Morrison had volunteered to join her, the old team together again, facing a threat that was personal in ways that went beyond professional duty. The enemy sniper called himself the Student, mocking call signs suggesting he'd learned from American techniques. His pattern was professional, patient, deadly. His effective range matched Jessica's own capabilities. This wasn't the Reaper. This was someone who'd studied Jessica's methods, who understood advanced ballistics, who could make impossible shots because someone had taught him how. Intelligence suggested the student had access to stolen ALRPS curriculum that he'd been trained specifically to counter American extreme range capabilities, that he considered himself Jessica's equal, or her superior. For 4 days, Jessica studied the student's pattern, his shots, his ranges, his techniques, and she saw it, saw her own methodology reflected back, twisted into weapon against forces she'd sworn to protect. He was good, exceptional, maybe as good as she'd been at the 29. But she was 32 now, 3 years older, slower reflexes, eyes not quite as sharp. The question that haunted her was, she still capable of matching a younger shooter using her own techniques against her? On the 5th day, the student made his mistake. He took a shot at a patrol, missed intentionally to draw a response, and stayed in position too long. Taunting, confident. Jessica ranged him 520 meters, beyond the Reaper engagement, beyond anything she'd attempted in combat. The conditions were brutal. Winds gusting to 18 knots, temperature 41 degrees C, heat mirage distorting everything beyond 500 meters. Morrison, spotting beside her, expressed what they both knew. "Chief, that's extreme even for you. And these conditions, this is harder than the Reaper shot." "He's using my techniques, sir. I wrote the curriculum he learned from. I know how he calculates how he thinks. That's my advantage." But doubt crept in. 3 years older, thousands of training rounds wearing on her body. Could she still execute at the level required? Jessica worked through calculations she'd performed 1,000 times. Range 520 meters. Wind 14 knots gusting to 18. Temperature 41 degrees. All factors worse than any she'd faced in combat. Her hands trembled more than they had 3 years ago. Her eyes struggled with heat at a mirage more than they once had. Age showed itself in subtle degradations of capability, but knowledge didn't age. Understanding didn't diminish. The physics that had worked at 29 still applied at 32. She made her final adjustments. Elevation 388 clicks up. Windage 59 clicks right. Then she did something she'd never done before a combat shot. She doubted. What if age had degraded her capability too much? What if she missed and the student killed more SEALs? What if her techniques, her legacy, her life's work now served the enemy? Morrison saw it. "Chief, you've got this. You're Jessica Kane. You made the impossible shot. You can make it again." "I was 29 then. I'm 32 now, different shooter. Same fundamentals, same knowledge. Age doesn't erase what you've mastered, it refines it. You've got 3 more years of experience. Use it." Jessica settled into position, breathing controlled despite doubt, heart rate elevated despite training. This wasn't just a shot. This was validation that everything she'd built, everything she'd taught, still mattered, still worked, still saved lives. She touched her father's dog tags one more time, whispered, "Guide this one, Dad." Trigger press. Flight time 4.1 seconds, longest of her career. Through the spotting scope, Morrison watched. 4 seconds felt like 4 years. Then impact. Center mass. 520 meters. The student never knew what hit him. Morrison's voice cracked with emotion. "Hit. Perfect hit, Chief. You just made a shot that proves impossible stays possible when you master the fundamentals. Proves you're still the best at what you do." But Jessica didn't celebrate. She worked her bolt scan for additional threats, maintained professional discipline. Because that's what separated operators from everyone else. Not the impossible shots, but the discipline to stay focused after making them. When they reached the student's position, they found stolen curriculum training materials, with Jessica's name on them, notes in margins, showing how he'd studied her techniques, learned her methods, tried to beat her at her own game. He'd been 31 years old, 1 year younger at his physical peak, and he'd lost to a 32-year-old woman because fundamentals trumped youth, because knowledge outlasted physical capability, because mastery persisted when everything else degraded. The mission ended. 3 SEALs avenged. Threat eliminated. Stolen techniques proven insufficient against the original master. But for Jessica, the real victory was simpler. She'd proven to herself that age hadn't stolen what mattered, that the impossible shot wasn't a moment of youth, but a product of mastery that transcended age. She was still the best at what she did, still capable, still relevant, still the shooter her father had trained her to become. When Jessica returned to Coronado, she made two decisions that would define her future. First, she would never again deploy operationally. The school needed her more than the battlefield. Second, she would marry Marcus Webb, who'd waited patiently while she proved to herself that she could still make the shots that mattered. The wedding was small, attended by family, SEAL teammates, and advanced long-range precision school graduates who'd traveled from across the country to witness their instructor embrace the life she'd deferred for years. Marcus understood what few people could, that Jessica's dedication to precision wasn't obsession, but responsibility. That the weight she carried wasn't burden, but purpose. That loving someone meant accepting their mission as part of who they were. The legend of the impossible shot had become impossible shots, plural. And the student had learned that some lessons could only be taught by the master. 10 years after the impossible shot that changed everything, Senior Chief Petty Officer Jessica Kane stood at a decision point that would define the rest of her life. At 39, with 26 years of naval service, she had the Advanced Long-Range Precision School established, successful, and institutionalized under the leadership of instructors she'd personally trained. But a new crisis emerged that threatened to undermine everything she had built. Intelligence agencies identified threats that made her question whether sharing knowledge had been wise. Foreign military contractors were training opposing forces in extreme-range sniper techniques using methodologies that looked disturbingly familiar. The stolen curriculum had been more widespread than originally believed. Not just Syria, but Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Philippines. Anywhere American forces operated, enemy snipers were making shots at ranges that shouldn't have been possible for insurgent forces. The techniques weren't just stolen. They were being improved, refined, adapted by foreign intelligence services with resources to develop capabilities beyond what Jessica had originally envisioned. The student had become students, plural, and some were approaching mastery that matched her own. 3 more incidents in the past 6 months. SEALs killed by enemy snipers operating at extreme range. Rangers eliminated by precision fire from distances exceeding conventional counter-sniper capability. Marines pinned down by threats they couldn't engage effectively. The call came from Rear Admiral Richardson, now commander of Special Operations Command, his voice carrying urgency that had become familiar over the years. Senior Chief, we have a pattern developing. Multiple enemy snipers operating at extreme range across 3 theaters, all using techniques derived from your curriculum, all demonstrating capability that matches our best operators. We need the original master back in the field. One final deployment, end this before it becomes systemic. Marcus, now her husband of 5 years, understood before she spoke. How long this time? 6 months, maybe longer. They're not just using my techniques, they're improving them. Someone with institutional resources is developing capabilities beyond what I originally taught. I need to see what they've done, learn their improvements, and develop countermeasures. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You're 39 years old. You've given 26 years of service. How much more can they ask? As much as it takes to protect the soldiers who depend on capabilities I created. If my knowledge is being used to kill Americans, then I'm responsible for developing solutions. I know, he said quietly. That's who you are. That's why I fell in love with you. Come home safe. Forward Operating Base, Phoenix, Afghanistan. Jessica's final deployment, her first in 7 years. The country looked different. Infrastructure improved, population centers more stable, but the mountains remained eternal, indifferent to human conflict. Commander Morrison, now 52, had volunteered once again to join her, bringing decades of accumulated experience and the partnership that had been forged in the crucible of the original impossible shot. Their relationship had evolved beyond military hierarchy into something approaching family, shared understanding of burdens that few people could comprehend. The enemy they faced this time wasn't a single sniper, but a network. Intelligence suggested at least 6 operators trained in extreme range techniques, coordinated through sophisticated command structure equipped with technology that matched or exceeded American capabilities. They called themselves the Academy, deliberate mockery of Jessica's school's suggestion that they'd moved beyond mere imitation into independent development. Their techniques showed refinements that Jessica hadn't considered: new calculation methods for extreme atmospheric conditions, modifications to ammunition that increased effective range, tactical patterns that exploited weaknesses in conventional counter-sniper doctrine. For 2 weeks, Jessica studied their methods through intelligence reports, ballistic analysis of recovered ammunition, pattern analysis of successful engagements. What she discovered was both professionally fascinating and personally terrifying. They'd taken her methodology and improved it. "They're good," she told Morrison during one of their evening briefings. "Better than my original students in some ways. They've had institutional support, unlimited resources, time to develop techniques I never had opportunity to explore." Morrison studied the intelligence summaries with concern that went beyond tactical considerations. "Chief, what if we can't match their capabilities? What if student becomes teacher?" "Then I learn from them," Jessica replied with characteristic directness. "Knowledge doesn't recognize nationality. If they've developed better techniques, I need to understand those techniques and integrate them into our own methodology." The opportunity came during the third week. Intelligence located one of the Academy's operators establishing position for extended operation against coalition patrol routes. Range to target 2, 8, and 90 meters. Beyond anything Jessica had attempted in combat, beyond anything taught at advanced long-range precision school. "That's almost 3 kilometers, Morrison said, studying the tactical situation through aerial reconnaissance. "Chief, I'm not sure this is possible even for you." Jessica was already working through preliminary calculations. "Physics says it's possible. Bullet drop will be approximately 550 inches. That's 45 feet. Wind drift could be 12 to 15 feet depending on conditions. Flight time approaching 5 seconds. Every variable becomes critical at this range." Morrison watched her work through mathematics that exceeded his understanding. "What's the success probability?" "Maybe 15%. Too many unknowns, too many variables I can't measure precisely. But if I don't engage, he continues killing coalition forces from ranges where conventional response is impossible." Jessica spent 6 hours in preparation, studying weather patterns, wind conditions at multiple altitudes, atmospheric effects that would influence bullet flight over nearly 3 kilometers. She used equipment that hadn't existed when she'd made the original impossible shot: advanced ballistic calculators, atmospheric monitoring systems, range-finding technology, accurate to single-meter precision. But technology was still just tools. The real weapon remained knowledge, experience, understanding of physics principles that govern projectile motion across extreme distances. The shot setup required movement to elevated position that provided clear sight lines to target area. Jessica's team, Morrison Sullivan, now a senior chief, and 2 younger operators who'd graduated from advanced long-range precision school, established Overwatch with security protocols that reflected lessons learned from decades of special operations. Through her scope at maximum magnification, the target was barely visible. Just a suggestion of movement among rocks, confirmation coming more from pattern analysis than direct observation. At 2,890 meters, distinguishing human from terrain features required patience and professional interpretation of minimal visual cues. Jessica worked through her calculations with methodical precision that had become second nature. Every factor mattered more at this range than any previous engagement. Temperature variations of 2 degrees created 8-inch changes in impact point. Wind estimates off by 1 knot meant 12 inches of missed distance. Atmospheric pressure differences affected bullet velocity in ways that could cause 20-inch variations in its trajectory. "Elevation correction, 457 clicks up," she murmured, working through the mathematics. "That's 114 minutes of angle. I'm aiming 114 feet above the target." Morrison watched through his spotting scope, trying to comprehend the ballistic solution she was implementing. "Chief, that's insane. You're aiming at empty sky nearly 12 stories above where he's sitting." "That's where physics says the bullet needs to go to arrive at target levels after 4.8 seconds of flight time," Jessica replied, continuing her adjustments. "Windage 67 clicks right. That accounts for wind drift, Coriolis effect, spin drift, and atmospheric deflection." She settled into firing position with ritual that had been refined across thousands of practice repetitions. Perfect stock weld, consistent eye relief. Natural point of aim that required no muscle tension to maintain. Breathing controlled, heart rate steady at 58 beats per minute. Trained resting rate that came from decades of cardiovascular conditioning. The moment of truth arrived with characteristic simplicity. Trigger broke cleanly at 3.5 pounds of pressure. The .338 Lapua Magnum roared, sending 300 grains of precisely crafted metal toward a target almost 3 kilometers away. For 4.8 seconds, nothing happened. The bullet climbed toward its peak trajectory nearly 120 feet above the boreline, slowing from supersonic to transonic to subsonic speeds as it covered distance that required mental comprehension rather than visual tracking. Then through Morrison's spotting scope, they watched the target collapse. "Hit," Morrison whispered, voice carrying disbelief that transcended professional composure. "Perfect hit at 2890 meters. Chief, that's the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history." Jessica worked her bolt chamber to fresh round, remained focused on her scope. One threat eliminated, unknown number remaining, record books don't matter, mission completion does. But privately, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. At 39 years old, she'd just proven that age, experience, and refined technique could push human capability to edges that few people ever explored. The impossible shot had become impossible shots plural, each one extending understanding of what was achievable when preparation met opportunity. The mission continued for another month. Jessica and her team eliminated 3 more of the Academy's operators, recovered intelligence materials that revealed the full scope of foreign development of extreme-range capabilities, and gathered technical information that would revolutionize American sniper training for the next decade. But the real victory was strategic rather than tactical. Jessica had demonstrated that American methodology properly applied with superior equipment and training could match or exceed foreign developments. The student-teacher relationship had been reestablished with the original master, proving her continued relevance. When they returned to Coronado, Jessica faced the decision she'd been avoiding for years: continue active duty and operational deployments, or transition to full-time instruction and program development. At 39, with 27 years of service, she'd earned the right to choose her own path. Marcus found her on their beach one evening, watching another Pacific sunset paint the sky in colors that had no names. "Thinking about the future. Thinking about legacy," Jessica replied. "I've proven I can still make the shots. Question is whether that's the best use of my remaining time in service." "What would your father say?" Jessica considered the question that went to the heart of everything. "He'd say I've carried his lessons far enough. That precision isn't just about shooting, it's about knowing when to shoot and when to teach others to shoot. I think it's time to focus completely on teaching." She made the decision the next day. Request transfer to permanent instructor status. No more deployments, full-time. Dedication to advanced long-range precision school development. The program had graduated 847 students over 15 years, but there were improvements to implement, international partnerships to expand, emerging technologies to integrate. Admiral Richardson, now Jessica's longtime supporter, approved the request immediately. "Senior Chief, you've given everything to operational service. Time to focus on institutional legacy. Build the program that ensures American snipers maintain superiority regardless of what adversaries develop." The final 5 years of Jessica's career were dedicated to transforming advanced long-range precision school from exceptional programming into permanent institutional advantage. She established partnerships with allied nations, developed curriculum for civilian law enforcement, created research programs that pushed the boundaries of what was possible with precision shooting technology. Student success rates improved to 67% through refined selection criteria and enhanced instruction techniques. Course length expanded to 12 weeks to accommodate advanced topics. International enrollment increased to 40% of each class, creating network of allied operators trained in American methodologies. But the achievement Jessica valued most was personal rather than professional. Emma and Sophie Hayes, daughters of the soldier whose death had started everything, both graduated from West Point and became Army officers. Emma chose to become a sniper, carrying forward the legacy of protection that had defined Jessica's entire career. At Emma's graduation from Army Sniper School, she approached Jessica with something that transcended professional courtesy. "Chief Kane, I wanted to thank you, not just for stopping the person who killed my father, but for showing me what service really means. You turned our family's tragedy into purpose that protects other families." Jessica looked at this 22-year-old woman who represented everything worth fighting for. "Emma, your father would be proud. You're carrying forward his commitment to protecting others. That's the highest form of service." "I want to attend advanced long-range precision school," Emma said. "Learn the techniques you developed. Continue what you started. The course is hard. Standards are unforgiving. Many people fail. I know, but you taught me that impossible just means difficult, and difficult can be mastered through preparation and dedication. I'm ready for the challenge. 6 months later, Second Lieutenant Emma Hayes became the youngest graduate in advanced long-range precision school history, achieving first-round hit probability of 43% at 2,000 meters. Her graduation represented closure of a circle that had begun with her father's death and Jessica's impossible shot in response. Senior Chief Petty Officer Jessica Kane retired on her 45th birthday after 30 years of naval service. The ceremony honored achievements that had transformed American Special Operations capabilities, but Jessica knew the real honor was in the front row. Marcus, now her husband of 10 years, Mary Kane, her mother, 82 years old, but still strong enough to witness her daughter's final military moment. Emma and Sophie Hayes, both serving officers carrying forward the legacy of protection their father had begun. Admiral Richardson delivered the farewell address that summarized 30 years of service. Senior Chief Kane's legacy cannot be measured in awards or medals. It is measured in lives saved by the 847 graduates she trained in enemy combatants, eliminated at extreme range by her student network, and coalition casualties prevented through capabilities she developed. Richardson paused, letting the weight of achievement settle. But her greatest legacy is this. She proved that impossible is just another word for unprepared, and preparation can overcome any limitation. The United States Navy thanks you for your service. The Special Operations community thanks you for your knowledge. And the families of soldiers protected by your graduates thank you for their loved ones who came home. After the ceremony, Jessica walked Coronado Beach one final time in uniform. Her father's dog tags still around her neck after 30 years of carrying them, 30 years of honoring his memory through precision, through teaching, through protection of others. Marcus walked beside her, understanding that his wife was transitioning not from service to retirement, but from one form of service to another. Ready for the next chapter. Ready to transform the weight, not lose it, Jessica replied. The weight made me who I am. I'll carry it differently now, that's all. Emma Hayes joined them, young officer with her whole career ahead, carrying lessons Jessica had taught through example rather than words. Chief Kane, what's next for you? Writing, Jessica said. The definitive textbook on extreme range precision shooting, consulting with equipment manufacturers, teaching civilian law enforcement. The knowledge doesn't retire just because I do. Sophie, now a military intelligence officer, added, I plan operations knowing we have extreme range capability because of what you built. It changes everything. Jessica looked at these young women, daughters of a soldier who died to enemy sniper fire, now serving, now protecting others, now preventing more families from experiencing their loss. That was legacy. That was closure. That was worth every weight carried across 30 years. The sun descended below the horizon, painting the sky in colors that had witnessed Jessica's entire career arc from vengeful daughter to master instructor. 30 years after her father's death had set her on this path, she'd completed the journey he'd started her on when he taught her that precision meant knowing yourself. She knew herself now, completely, deeply, with certainty that came from 30 years of proving that impossible just meant difficult, and difficult could be mastered through preparation, dedication, and courage to attempt what everyone else said couldn't be done. The impossible shot had been 4.8 seconds of bullet flight 15 years earlier. But the legacy was measured in decades, in lives saved, in students taught, in families kept whole because someone had demonstrated that limitations existed to be challenged. One precise shot at a time. And somewhere in that place where the fallen watch over those they've left behind, Master Sergeant Cole Kane smiled. His daughter had learned the lesson, mastered herself, mastered precision, and taught thousands of others to do the same. The impossible shot had become a lifetime of impossible shots made by operators Jessica Kane had trained by students of her students, by the knowledge cascade that would continue long after she'd fired her last round through the TAC 338 that had made history. Because the real legacy wasn't the shot. It was the understanding that impossible was negotiable, and someone with the right knowledge and courage could change outcomes that everyone else accepted as inevitable. That was precision. That was legacy. That was worth carrying forever. In the years that followed, Jessica's textbook, Beyond Impossible, The Science of Extreme Range Precision, became the definitive reference for military and civilian snipers worldwide. Her consulting work with ammunition manufacturers led to cartridge designs that extended effective range by another 200 meters. The civilian law enforcement program she developed reduced officer casualties in sniper incidents by 73%. But the measure that mattered most to Jessica was simpler. Emma Hayes and 846 other graduates continued making impossible shots in defense of their nations, their teammates, and their families. The methodology lived on, evolved, improved with each new generation of students who refused to accept that impossible meant impossible. The legend of Jessica Kane wasn't about one impossible shot. It was about teaching the world that impossible was just another word for unprepared, and preparation could overcome any limitation. One precise shot at a time.